Hi everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today's job may become an ugly one, and it's one that I've been dreading like the plague for a long time. Our Kubota has sprung a leak. These two lines here are the oil cooler. They cool the hydrostatic oil. This one you can see here isn't too bad because it's got a joint right at the front, where this bugger, it's one piece all the way to the back axle. So I've already gone ahead and taken off the snowblower and the blade and everything, because to get at this we may have to take many things apart. I'm hoping it's not going to be as ugly as it seems. Absolute worst case scenario, I will not hesitate to cut the thing and put a joint in it here. This is not a high pressure hydraulic line. It's a cooler line, just like the transmission cooler lines on our cars. It carries low pressure, and we don't have to worry about having a joint in it. But this is my Kubota, and I like it to be, you know, tut, nice. So I would really like to replace this line in one piece. So what we're going to do now is jack it up, get the back wheel off, and have a look, see what we have to do. I've got all the wheel nuts off. Now what we have to bear in mind is these tires are loaded. They're full of calcium or some kind of liquid ballast, which makes them really heavy. So you gotta keep your wits about you when you're handling these things. You have to keep them vertical. Just roll them nice and easy. And if it gets away from you and starts to tip over, just let it go. Don't try and save it, because it will either take you with it and you'll high side over top of it, or it'll come down on top of you and it'll break your leg. Be very careful with these things. Anyway, we're just going to jiggle it. How you get them off is you have it so it's just off the ground, and you jiggle it back like this, and then gently roll it to where you got to go. We're going to lean it right against that door. We'll get the grill and the hood sides out of the way here. This all comes apart pretty easily, or it's supposed to. There we go. There's the grill out. And then the hood side, you just pops out. There we go. As part of this job, as well as the cooler line running back to the back here, this is the suction line for the hydraulic pump. And the main hydraulic line is up there. They're all bundled together, so they all kind of have to come out in one piece, and they're all a little bit ugly. The main suction line, we're just going to go ahead and clean it and give it a paint job. Same with the main pressure line. It's just the cooler line we're actually going to replace. There's another little line in there that, while we've got the hydraulic oil drained out of it, we'll pull that line out too and get it cleaned up and painted. It hasn't failed yet, so we're going to nip it in the bud. First thing we're going to do is loosen the suction filter here and start the oil draining out of it. We're draining it into a clean bucket because this oil was changed at the beginning of last season. It's the expensive synthetic one. So we'll be able to reuse it. We'll just put it right back in when we're done our job. I'm going to go ahead now, and whether I need to actually take this stuff apart or not to do this job, I don't know. But in order to make it easier to show you what I'm doing, and in order to make it easier for me just to work around in here, we're going to take a few things out. First thing I'm going to take out is this inner fender. And I'll probably have to take this upright of the cab structure down too. I've gone ahead now, removed this front wheel and put it on a stand. And now what we have to get out of the way, it looks daunting, but it's just a bunch of big bolts and big parts. We've got to get the hanger for our quick hitch out of here. And then we've got to get this upright for the loader out of the way. And then in there is the right front cab mount. We have to unbolt that from the frame. We'll get all that stuff out of there, and that should give us a clear lane to get these lines out of here. Well, with the help of the engine crane, we got this thing out, and it should be real fun getting that back in. but we'll manage. So now I got to get tidied up here, put some stuff away so I can move, and we should have a pretty good lane to get this bundle of lines out of there. Now I've got all that framework out of the way. Next thing we've got to get out of the way is the brake pedals and all that mechanism. You can see here the lines are in behind it. So there's a pin here and a shaft that goes all the way through from the other side. It's a cross shaft for the brakes. We'll get that out, and then there's some stuff back there. Now we're starting to make a mess here. To get the lines out, I have to get this thing out, the bell crank for the foot pedal. And how you get that out is by lifting the floorboard off, which is fine, except the floorboard goes in first and everything else is on top of it. So I got to get this thing out, and then we should be able to get the floorboards out. They're pretty crusty anyway, so it'll be a good time to clean them up and give them a coat of paint. So there we go. All the flooring is out of it. What a job that was. I can tell you, I'm very glad I'm not paying by the hour to have this done. Maybe they would be not too happy about getting this job. Holy Toledo. Anyway, everything is wide out in the open now, and we'll have no trouble getting these lines all fixed up. What may be trouble later is when I try to put this back together. But I've got all the manuals. I've got shop manual. The parts manual is accessible online, so it should be just fine. Moving right along, I've got the ends of the lines undone at this end. I'm working on this end here. Here's the one. I've got you can see over there, the oil cooler out, because you have to take it out because the one line crosses over underneath it. Now we just have to figure out how to get this mess out, because they're all bundled together under there. I might have to work on getting them separated. Well, that's it for now. I've got everything apart. Tomorrow morning I got to zip over to the dealer and order a few bits and pieces, because I never ever want to take this apart again. Oh brother. Finally, all the old parts are out. All that to change those two bloody lines. And I'm going to change this one too. This is a little one at the back. It's just a little transfer line, and you can see there it's pretty ugly looking. So it's like $18 or something. So we'll buy a new one of those, even if we have to wait a couple of days for it to show up. What I got to do now is I got a few parts. The floorboards, I scraped and ground them all. But I have to take them inside and clean them with some degreaser in the laundry tub downstairs, so that they're ready for some heavy rust primer, and then we'll give them a coat of rust paint before we put them back in. And we just got to wait for our parts to show up. Hopefully it won't take too long. Last thing I've done for today is the suction pipe, that little bypass pipe, and the delivery pipe. I cleaned them all up, ground all the scabs off them. They were good and solid, no problems there. So I put a nice coat of red oxide primer and then blasted them with the proper Kubota gray paint, so they can just go back on. And now we got to make all this junk back into a tractor. I've got the bundle of lines all back in now. There's 1, 2, 3 of them. And next step is to go ahead and install the oil cooler. This thing looks just a little crusty, and I did have thoughts of replacing it. But I checked it out, and it's well over $200 for a new one. And because it just sits right here in the front of the tractor, it's very easy to change. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. It didn't leak before, so it shouldn't leak now. If it does start leaking in the future, we can easily replace it. The oil cooler goes together pretty easily. you just push the pipe into it, and then this little clip here, this little clippy thing holds it together. Just like that. Doesn't look like much, but it does the job. Next thing, this clamp goes here on the frame to hold these lines. So they have these two rubber isolators on, which would tend to go against my better judgment to put those over our new lines. But quite frankly, where they were on the old lines was about the only place where they weren't rusted. So I guess they're okay. I smear some grease around, and that'll help protect them a bit. Now what we have to do is get this piece of frame rail hung back up in there. What this thing does is it just kind of stiffens up it ties the transmission, the rear end, and the back of the engine all together to make it nice and stiff. There's one on each side. So I got to find all the bolts and we'll get this thing back up in there. So here we go. We've got all this stuff all back together. I don't have any parts left over, so I guess that's good. Now we can go ahead and start getting the floorboards back in. I cleaned them all up and put a heavy coat of rust primer on them. Then I blasted them with rubberized undercoating. Oh, it was so nice when I came out in the garage this morning. My garage smelled like rubberized undercoating, which if you're a young guy back in the 70s or the 80s patching up old cars so you could drive around, you were very familiar with the smell of that stuff. It brought back a lot of memories. Oh, here we go. I got the floorboard set in place. Now I can go start putting all this stuff back together. Oh, we're getting near the end of this job, finally. Next thing I want to do is get the upright for the loader back in before I finish off all this sheet metal. I'm just trying to put it back together in the order that I took it apart. And this thing has to go in now. So when I took them down, the cab mount and this thing kind of came down in one piece. But I figured out only one of the bolts goes through both. So I've left that bolt out and clamped the cab mount so it's up like that. So I should be able to get this thing up in behind it. Theoretically. We'll find out. I got to get the crane. So that's going pretty well. You can see now that I've got it. It started going up in behind the cab mount. It's right there on the boss where it needs to be, and the same thing at the back. So we'll just continue very slowly lifting it up because there's some very expensive pieces of glass here in the neighborhood, but we should be okay. At least the pile of parts on the floor is slowly getting smaller. I've got all the floorboards and that all put back in. That's all good and solid again. Now I'm going to put this fender back in. Fender's all back on and the light is back on the back. That's good. Now we're moving on to getting the got to get this hydraulic valve. It's installed. And now I've got to get the hoses. There's one block on a little manifold that goes on there. And then I have to hook up the control cables and the joystick and everything inside the cab. I've got all this stuff, the cables and everything put back together. So right now what we're going to do is get the wheels back on, get it back on the floor. Then I've got to fill up the hydraulic system. I put some oil in it. Now while I let that kind of settle, I'm going to put the quick hitch on and see if I can get the snowblower back on it. So last night I got the joystick back together and the cables adjusted and everything all good to go. And I started it up, and as soon as I pulled on the joystick, this hose let go and made a big mess. Anyway, we got that cleaned up. Had to wait till this morning. I run up to Princess Auto and they made me 2 new hoses. That's these 2 hoses here. So that's all good now. I've got this thing adjusted. How you adjust these things. Your adjustment is here. You can see these long, it's hard to see, there's so much stuff in there. Those long sleeves, the joint between the cable and the valve is inside there. So you adjust it by turning that, and that pushes the cable out or pulls the cable in. And what you're trying to do is get this exactly perfectly in the center of its travel. And you know you've accomplished that when you can push the lock in, when everything is in neutral. Top ends of the cable have a concentric groove on them, and this thing, when it's pulled out, the cables can go past it. But when you push it in, it locks into the two grooves and locks out the joystick. So that tells us that it's adjusted perfectly. Now I'll tighten up the jam nuts on these, and we can put the hood sides and the grill and everything back in. Well, that's all hooked up. Everything good. Now I just got to spin it around to get the rear blade back on, and we can take it out and try it, because let me tell you, all the time that it's been laid up, Mother Nature's been working overtime dumping snow around here. There's a big mess to clean up. It left a hell of a mess, but it seems to be okay. So while the Speedy Dry does its job, we're going to go out and blow some snow and see how she works. Alright, well that went pretty well. Got all our snow cleaned up. Everything's working good like it should. I got no complaints with it at all. So I guess that's another successful job. I was a little bit worried, man, when I saw this poor thing in a million pieces all over my shop, but it's all back together and working properly. Well, I'm going to wrap it up, I guess. My back hurts, my knees hurt, my shoulders hurt, my neck hurts. I'm getting old. This was a big job, but a lot of stuff got done. I was really happy to get those floorboards all fixed up. They probably weren't going to last much longer. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Hope you'll come back and see what we're doing next time. And until then, this is Kevin checking out from the Claremont Classic Garage. So long.